Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Wednesday morning as we are studying together Perashat Korah. This class has been sponsored anonymously for the Refuah Shlema of all of Mizrahi. If anybody would like to sponsor a class, please email us info@ejsny.org. Rabotai, there is a Mishna in Pirkei Avot, chapter 5, Mishna 20. We're almost there as well in our Pirkei Avot shiurim. And the Mishna says, Kol mahloket shehi leshem shamayim Sofa lehitkayim. Any dispute, machloket is a dispute. You know, the Pri Megadim says that it's not him. Our rabbis say a person should always learn each topic in the right time of the year. So as an example, before Rosh Hashanah, we should study the laws of Rosh Hashanah. Before Pesach, we should study the laws of Pesach. Before Hanukkah, the laws of Hanukkah. Says the Pri Megadim, Korah, when it should be studied? Every day of the year. Because every day of the year there's machloket, there's argument, there's fighting, and we can learn many, many lessons from Korah and how to avoid dangerous mahlokets. The Mishnah tells us, Kol mahloket shehi l'shem shamayim, any machloket that's for the sake of heaven, sofa lehitkayim, will end up enduring, it will have a constructive outcome, it will last, however you want to translate that, which itself is not so simple. But the Mishnah is saying that if your machloket is leshem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, that's good. V'she'ena leshem shamayim, if your machloket is not for the sake of heaven, en sofa lehitkayim, then it will not last, it will not have a constructive outcome. So actually, when we say machloket is bad, and many times you'll hear a rabbi or somebody speaking on this week's parasha saying that, we learn from here how dangerous mahloket is. Okay, that sentence is incorrect. Mahloket depends what kind. Mahloket is not good or bad. Depends what kind of mahloket. Okay, it's like saying food is bad. Depends how much. Machloket, if it's leshem shamayim, it's very good. And the Mishnah says, as an example, Ezohi mahloket shehi leshem shamayim. What's an example of a machloket that's for the sake of heaven? Says the Mishnah. Anyone know? Give it a few seconds if you want to guess, write in your answers. Which mahloket is good? What's an example of a machloket that's for the sake of heaven? Says the Mishnah, Hillel v'Shamai. Beautiful. Hillel v'Shamai. Hillel v'Shamai have many machlokot. The takeaway shouldn't be, by the way, that you're not allowed to have a disagreement. You're not allowed to argue. We all have to be on the same page, right? We all have to be on the same page of politics. We all have to be on the same page of halakha. We all have to be on the same page of hashkafa, philosophy. It's not true. Not true. You're allowed to have machloket. You're allowed to have disagreement. You're allowed to have difference of opinion. The Gemara says we don't all look alike and we don't all think alike. It's very likely that people next to you don't think like you, and that's normal. Just like you're not shocked when people don't look like you. You're like, oh my God, that's so weird. You and I don't look the same. Of course you don't look the same. Even though, by the way, we all come from Adam Harishon. We all have the same exact father, right? But we all come out differently. And that's okay to look differently. So too, says the Mishnah, it's okay to think differently. And the Gemara is filled with mahloket. Every page, there's dozens. Mishnah arguing on each other. Gemara, each one's arguing on how to understand the Mishnah. Rashi arguing on Tosfot, how to understand the Gemara. Then you have each Aharon understanding Rashi, mahloket all over the page, the whole thing, everyone's arguing on everyone. The problem is not the argument. The problem is, are we leshem shamayim? An example of leshem shamayim is Hillel v'Shamai. Hillel, one rabbi, versus Shammai, the other rabbi. Two opposite rabbis. And by the way, if it's leshem shamayim, that's great. Now, what's not leshem shamayim? What's that example? What's an example of a machloket that's not leshem shamayim? Beautiful. Our parasha, you guessed it, Korah. What should, if I just ask you, okay, what would be the answer? Ma Leshem Shamayim is Hillel and Shammai. Shelo Leshem Shamayim is, give me the both sides. Give me the Hillel and Shammai, that's good. And bad is Korah and Moshe. Or Korah and Aharon. But that's not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says, you know what's a mahaloket that's not Leshem Shamayim? Korah v'chol adato. Korah and his crew. Korah and his company. So it's very, very interesting. Right away we observe the Mishnah is not saying that a good one is Hillel and Shammai and a bad one is Korah and Moshe, which is what should have said. It's not consistent. It says Korah and his people. Why doesn't it say Korah and Moshe? Why doesn't it give us both sides of the argument, just like it gives us by the Leshem Shamayim one? This is a fantastic question. And the truth is there is a lot to say, and there's a lot of questions on this Mishnah even. So as an example, another question we could ask is, how do I know if I'm Leshem Shamayim? That's also a good question, no? I guarantee you, everyone thinks they're Leshem Shamayim. I've never seen someone arguing with someone else and they say, oh yeah, I'm just here to cause waves. I'm not really serious about what I'm arguing. I'm just playing devil's advocate. But I'm not serious in my views. How often do people say that? Yeah, on the Shabbat table, maybe you play devil's advocate. But when we're arguing philosophy, hashkafa, politics, we are serious in our opinion. And we all think that we're honestly doing this, and I really think that what I think is right. I'm Leshem Shamayim. And you probably think what you think is right. We're all, by the way, let me tell you something. When Cain killed his brother, he did it for the sake of heaven. Korah is arguing for the sake of heaven. Everybody is Leshem Shamayim. You can't just tell me, if you're arguing Leshem Shamayim, well, that's the problem. How do I know if I'm Leshem Shamayim? From the fact that I'm in the argument, I'm biased, and I don't see clearly. My judgment is clouded. So I'm sure everybody assumes that they are, right? No, I'm really, everyone that's arguing having a machloket with their spouse thinks they're right, and they're not being stubborn, and this is the principle, and I have to argue here because enough is enough, right? Everyone thinks that. How do we know whether we fall under the category of Leshem Shamayim or not? So that's two questions. Number one, why doesn't it list both sides of the argument? When it says Korah, it should say Korah ve'Moshe. But instead, it says Korah and his people. And question two, how do you know if you're altruistic or not? If you're for the sake of heaven? Everyone does, I think. And the answer is, each question answers the next. And that means so long. This is something that Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi says, something very powerful. And he says, if you want to know if your argument is Leshem Shamayim, he says, read the Mishnah as following. Kol mahloket shehi Leshem Shamayim, any mahloket that's for the sake of heaven will last. Not it's going to last forever, but sofa lehit kayim. The purpose about what you're arguing remains the topic of argument. A lot of times you're arguing with somebody and it's not about anymore the policy. It's not anymore about the topic. Now it becomes, I have to win or else I lose. And I can't admit I was wrong in what I said or in my views. And now ego becomes involved. And sometimes the machloket begins. It begins actually very sincere. What's the best choice? Where's the best place to put our child for school? What's the best tactic for our family? Where should we live? Where should we move? What's the right decision for this family, for the business, right? If so long that the topic remains there, that's great. The second the argument becomes, we forget about that, and all of a sudden now it's about I have to prove I'm right, and the ego becomes involved, and it's me versus you, that's where the sofa, the end goal, the reason we started arguing is no longer the focus. We started arguing here, and now the argument shifted very, very far. We no longer even care sometimes about what the original argument was about. And that's what the Mishnah is saying according to Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi. So long that sofa leit kayem, as long as the reason you're arguing remains the reason, that's okay. But once there's ego involved, once it's about me and you, right? They say in a marriage there's is a relationship where one side is right and the other side is the husband. Right? That's what it is. A man once came to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He said, Rabbi, I want to tell you something. Me and my wife, Baruch Hashem, were married for a year and we never fought. We had no disagreements. And Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said, that's impossible. You're a liar. He said, what do you mean, Rabbi? You yourself at your wife's funeral said that you don't have to apologize to her. You don't have to apologize. So you yourself said you're married for all these years and you never got into an argument. And Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach looked at his student and he said, what are you talking about? I never said we never argued. We argued plenty. But I never had to apologize because it never became personal. It was never about me or you. It was about us and what was best for the family. My rabbi once told me, when you're arguing with your wife, you can argue, hold hands. Hold hands. Don't squeeze too hard, but hold hands. Because it's a good way of reminding ourselves that it's not about, it's not about me or you. It's about what's best for us, for this business. And again, to remove ego, that's also its own class, and that's a very difficult thing to do because once there's ego involved, and if we don't work on our humility, there's no way we're going to get to this level. And working on our ego is its own topic, its own class. But in just one sentence, just touch on it at least for a second, the way we work on that. And again, it's a life's work, becoming humble. But it's about thinking about other people. It's about becoming a giver. So long that we're thinking about ourselves. There are two types of people. There are givers and takers. Which one are we? That's a question that we need to ask ourselves and be honest about. But life is about becoming a giver, and the more we give, the more we remove our ego and ourselves from the equation. And Korah was a taker. The first word of our parasha, Vayikach Korah. Korah took. And because he took, and because he's a taker, he was never able to think about other people. Every machloket was shelo leshem shamayim, was always about himself. And if that's the case, we maybe answer our other question. The argument of Hillel and Shammai, I have my view and you have your view, and both are okay. And I respect that you think differently than me. And let's sit and let's discuss. Let's sit and let's discuss. In a machloket that's leshem shamayim, there are two sides. There's Hillel and there's Shammai. And each one understands that you have a position, and I respect you and I validate that you have a position. I agree to disagree. But when you mahlok, it's not leshem shamayim. There are no two sides. It's my side, and that's the only side. And I don't want to have to hear what you have to say. And by the way, we're living in a time like that. The entire idea of cancel culture. There is no other side. You don't have a position. You don't have an opinion, and what you think is completely wrong, and I don't even want to hear it, and we're not going to debate it, and there's no room for argument. There's no room for discussion. It's a one-sided argument, and that's maybe why it says that a machloket that's not heaven's sake is the machloket as an example of Korah and who? It's not Korah and Moshe, because according to Korah, there is no Moshe. There is no other side. It's only me. It's me and my people. If you can't even entertain another option, if you're not willing to hear, if we can't have that conversation and see what the other opinion is all about, that's a machloket of me and myself. That's a very nice indication that my machloket is not l'shem shamayim. So these are very powerful points on the idea again of machloket from our parasha. But I would like to share with you today another answer to this question of why it says Korah and his team as opposed to saying Korah and Moshe. You look at the people that come with Korah. Who's here with him? Well, we have Korah, we know. Then we have these 250 men, right? Nesi'e Eda, Keri'e Moed, Anshe Shem, important people, leaders, heads of communities. And we have Datan va'Aviram from the tribe of Bnei Reuven. So says the Abarbanel, there are three groups of people right here. There's Korah, there's 250 men, and there's the tribe of Reuven. And each one wants something else. We often think that the ones that are coming with Korah are all on the same page. They're not on the same page. Korah wants, what does he want? If he could have it his way, he'll have the Kohen Gadol. It'll be him that wins because he has the ancestry, right? He has the yichus, the pedigree. If you ask the 250 men, how would you want it? If you win, what do you want? They all wanted to revert back to how it was before the Egel. We want to have the firstborn should be the ones working. So again, Korach wants it to be Levi. The 250 men want it to be the firstborns, and that's how it was before the Egel. And then you have the third group. They're not Leviim, so they don't have a claim from that point. They're not the firstborns, and therefore there's no reason they should work either from that perspective. But they are from the tribe of Reuven. And originally, Reuven was supposed to be the one having all the rights. Now, again, he lost it, but they're hoping we could undo everything. And that's really what Korah is claiming. Korah is promising every imbalance is going to be undone. And it's going to go back. If you want Reuven, go for it. And if you want... But what's very interesting is to ask ourselves this question. If Korah ends up winning this argument, imagine that side won. Who would actually be the one to take over? Who would be... So what's very interesting? Even if Korah wins, it's not clear who would be the next leader. Because they would have another machloket now amongst themselves. Because they all wanted something else. And Moshe over here finds himself arguing with three different positions. He has three different groups in front of him. He has the Leviim that he's arguing with. He has the firstborns that he's arguing with. And then he has Datan and Aviram from the tribe of Reuven that he has to argue with. And each one needs a different answer. So as an example, the firstborns... He tells them, all right, listen, tomorrow we'll do a test with a frying pan and let's see. He doesn't actually answer them so much because their claim is not so strong. Reuven, as well, their claim is not so strong because you lost it all the way back from Yaakov Avinu and he sends them home. And that's why he has to recall them afterwards. And he calls Datan v'Aviram, guys, come and join us. And he tries to argue and debate with them. But the only real argument is the tribe of Levi. Because their argument is, we didn't sin in the Egel. We should stay with why'd you pick a specific guy within our tribe? Aharon, it's not fair. What do we do wrong? We're all holy. We should all work. Let's take turns. Aharon one day, me another day, you another day. Let's take turns. Let's pass the ball around. And that's why there's three different positions over here that are all part of the same side. And says the Kli Yakar, they didn't all want the same thing, Korach's side. One guy wanted it to be Leviim, one guy wanted it to be firstborns, one guy wanted it to be the Reuven. And they don't all see the eye to eye. You don't all see it. But what happened was, they say the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Right? So when you have a common enemy, sometimes we'll side together temporarily. And it's amazing. And again, I'm sorry to keep doing this, but we keep going back to current events. You see this so often today, that people that don't even agree on the same thing, but they'll side together because there's someone else that they disagree with more. You see it in Israel right now with Bennett. We see it in people that are marching with Palestine. It's the funniest thing. We stand with Palestine. You see these people and they're standing there with these signs. And if they stood there, right, with their sign in Gaza, they would get shot. They would get killed because of their views. You know, Bella Hadid would have no platform in Gaza. She can't dress like she dresses. All these people, you know, we stand, you know, people that with pride, we stand with, they would shoot you in Gaza. They would never allow you to march. But when sometimes we have a common enemy, then we can't stand together. So here Korah doesn't really agree to Datan v'Aviram. And Datan v'Aviram don't agree to Korah. And none of them agree either to the 250 firstborns. But temporarily we could side together because we all disagree with Moshe. At least that we have in common. At least that we know is not the right answer. And maybe that's another answer to our question. Again, our question was, any machloket that's not leshem shamayim? And what's an example of that machloket? What's an example of people that are not leshem shamayim? The Mishnah says Korah and his people. Korah and his followers. And again, it doesn't say Korah and Moshe, because the Mishnah is teaching us something even deeper. That when a person is not altruistic, when a person is not sincere, then he'll end up finding that he has people within his own group that he argues with. Korah and his people, amongst themselves, there was also a sub-machloket, a sub-argument again and again and again. And that's maybe sometimes a good question to ask ourselves, you know, when we are looking into these things, when we have these arguments, you know, do I agree with the people that I'm standing with? Do I even agree with them? And sometimes the answer is no, and that's a very interesting question that we should ask ourselves. If the answer is no, then maybe I'm not really arguing on the right side. Maybe I'm not talking to the right people. You know, and by the way, this is why it says Vayikach Korah ben Yitzhar ben Kehat ben Levi. Korah, the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kehat, the son of Levi. And it goes back 3 generations. And it stops there. It doesn't go all the way back to Yaakov. Why not? Why doesn't it go back to Yaakov? And the answer is because Yaakov prayed that it should stop there. Yaakov prayed, don't mention my name with Korah. Now, we spoke about already in the previous class why that Yaakov didn't want them to go back to him. We said because here Korah is being deceiving. And in a way, Yaakov didn't want it to trace back to him, lest one may think that Yaakov is also guilty of deception when he took the blessings from his father Yitzchak. And so the Torah leaves out his name. There was no deception with Yaakov taking the blessings from Esav. Don't try to connect what Korah is doing back to what Yaakov is doing. Yes, you could connect it back to what Levi did. Levi was deceiving. When he told them to do a Brit Milah and then he killed them all, that was deception. And Yaakov was upset at him for that. But stop at Levi. There's nothing more past that. Yaakov, different topic. That's one answer that we saw already. But the Kli Yakar says, again, if you ask Levi, why do you hold that you should be in charge? They'll say, Levi never sinned. Okay, that's a good argument. If you ask, the Egel, the firstborns, why do you think you should be in charge? The firstborns will say, because, yes, we did the Egel, but we were forgiven for the Egel. So let's go back to that. That's also a good argument. But if you go to Reuven and you say to them, what's your position? Why do you want to work? Reuven lost it. Say, yeah, but, that was a long time ago. Yeah, but no one ever undid that. There was never a forgiven or a pardon for that. So what exactly is Reuven's claim over here? Trying to get back their right. And this, again, is what Korah is trying to do. Korah is promising every person, I'm going to give you what you want. And he knows in the back of his mind it's not going to happen. He knows he can't follow through on his promise. He knows it's a lie. He knows this is just for my platform because I need to get everyone over here to vote for me. And the second I get their vote, right, and once I'm in office, I don't have to follow through on anything. And unfortunately, we see it a lot of times. And Korah is promising every imbalance in history is going to get corrected. Every wrong is going to become right. You, Levi, is fine. Firstborns also. Even Reuven, if I'll go back and I'll change what Yaakov, my great-great-grandfather, did. I'll change what Reuven received even. And so he's trying to undo Yaakov, who gave the firstborn to Yosef. Korach's even undoing that, and maybe that's why it doesn't attach him to Yaakov. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kehat ben Levi. But you're not being a grandson of Yaakov right now because you're actually trying to undo what Yaakov did, and therefore Yaakov is left out of this family tree. Very powerful. So again, I think this is a lot of food for thought. Just to recap what we learned today. Kol machloket, any argument that is for the sake of heaven, any argument that's for the sake of heaven is good. And the problem is, how do we know if we are for the sake of heaven? We all think we're for the sake of heaven. So maybe one answer is, like Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi said, so long that sofa lehit kayem, so long that we're arguing about what we originally argued about. So long that remains the topic, it's okay to argue. Nothing wrong. Once the topic becomes me or you, and it's personal, that's where we fall into a lot of problems. That's one answer. And it's a lesson in our ego. It's a lesson in trying to remove any arrogance from ourselves. It's about being a giver. Korach was a taker. Vayikach Korach. And because of that, he fell into this very, very deep hole of in sofa lehit kayem. He didn't actually care about what he argued about. That was just a facade. That was just, again, something fake. It was all about him and about winning. That's a very dangerous thing. When our machlokets become about winning, that's no longer leshem shamayim. And again, so long that we have ego, it's going to be very hard for us to be honest with ourselves. Another answer to our question is so long that there are two sides, and I could respect your side, and I agree to disagree. And you know what? I don't see it like that. I don't see it like that. I don't know why you see it like that, but I respect your position. You have an opinion, and I respect it, and I'll allow you to voice your opinion. That's okay. But the second we have this cancel culture that there's no two sides, it's just my side. And that's why it says Korah va'adato. You know what's Korach's position? It's not Korach and Moshe. There is no Moshe. It's me and my team. That's the only team. There is no other team. There is no other opinion. I won't even allow you to post it. And again, unfortunately, we're seeing that so often today. So many platforms online that are silencing people and their viewers, and anything that's written in a certain way that doesn't fit their views or their opinion or their storyline, they just completely omit it and they block such people. We have to ask ourselves, maybe that's not so l'shem shamayim, to not allow other people to voice their opinions. And finally, even by the way, even that, it's we can't allow everyone to say everything. There has to be a certain censor, because when it leads to violence, when it leads to dangerous, acts, that's also not allowed. We shouldn't, not everything should be allowed to be said also. I definitely agree to that. And the final answer to our question, why does it say Korach and his group, is because even amongst themselves, Korach did not see eye to eye with everybody. They just joined forces temporarily because they had a common enemy. But, it's food for thought as well for today. We see all these people holding hands and marching together. But they themselves, and that's often been how come the, people have stood up against the Jews. We've often been a victim of this type of philosophy and approach in history. You see all these, many times in history, people have stood up against the Jews because they, would get rid of them. And, if you think that you can temporarily silence one side because you're going to side with them, and at least let's just get rid of the Jews for now. But very quickly, it's going to be the Jews, and then there's someone else that's next. So we have to sometimes turn to the root of evil and to find out, is this something that we agree with or disagree with? Is this a machloket that is l'shem shamayim or not? Either way, we'll stop over here. So many lessons. We should be zocheh that our machlokot, because we are going to argue. We are going to have difference of opinions with people around us, whether it's, in the Beit Midrash or on the Shabbat table or maybe just in an office. We're going to have difference of opinion. And we should be zocheh that all our machlokot, not that we should never argue because it's inevitable, but at least we should always remain l'shem shamayim in our arguments. We'll stop over here. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.